if you would cast your mind back, you'll see that in the last couple of weeks, I've actually spent some time talking about myopia. Leadership myopia, I believe it was, that I spoke to a few days ago. But I want to dive a little deeper today. And in doing so, I actually want to address the marriage of avarice and myopia. You know, some wise man once said that in the absence of the knowledge of purpose, abuse becomes inevitable. But when we speak to the abuse that comes as a function of the absence of purpose, we rarely ever really deal with it in terms of avarice being a replacement for purpose. But I am beginning to, as I have examined our condition, I am beginning to believe that the avarice that you see in the public space in Nigeria and even in our private lives actually comes from the myopia induced by a complete misunderstanding of purpose. So let me start by defining the two key words in that topic. And what are these keywords? Avarice and myopia. Avarice, loosely defined, speaks to an excessive or insatiable desire for material wealth or gain. It speaks to, you know, what Yorubas call it wambiliki wambia. When you don't know when you are, is greed, in extreme greed. But it speaks to acquisition, unbridled and mad acquisition of wealth, of material possession. That is why you see a man owning 10 cars, having 20 houses. I've heard of civil servants caught up in EFCC's web, some of whom are said to own as many as 100 houses. In Abuja, for that matter, just one town, you find a person owning 100 houses, and then you begin to ask yourself, exactly what does a single person expect to do with so much? People steal more than they can spend in 100 lifetime. You begin to understand that this is not acquisition that can be explained by poverty mentality. It has been elevated beyond that. You're actually dealing with a level of insanity that bears or demands closer inspection. The second word in that sentence or in the topic itself is the word myopia. Myopia speaks to a lack of foresight or intellectual insight. Most of the time, when you use it in the medical form, it's speaking to short-sightedness. But in reality, in its socio-political context, it's speaking to a complete absence of foresight. The capacity to envision is what myopia speaks to in the context of usage. So what I'm saying in essence is that the marriage of unbridled greed, a thirst, excessive or insatiable desire for wealth, is now married to a lack of foresight or intellectual insight. And then you find these two ailments combining in those who presume to rule the Nigerian state. And I think it is important that we dive down and look at these issues and then examine how it has affected us as victims of Nigeria. I'm sure you prefer that I called you citizens of Nigeria, but I would believe that the Nigerian is essentially not a citizen. You are just victims of the Nigerian state. So today, let's take this subject against the backdrop of a biblical verse, and that will be Habakkuk chapter 2, I believe, verse 3. It says, a vision is for an appointed time. Though it tarries, wait for it. Write it down. Make it plain. But the most important part, it says that those who read it might run with it. Now, If you have a vision, it is important to understand that more often than not, the vision extends beyond a man's lifetime. The visionary is probably not going to ever be able to complete the totality of the vision. So he writes down his vision. That is what the Bible is enjoining him to do. So in writing it down, he's saying that those who read it, that they may run with it. What does it mean to run with it? He's not speaking to them becoming Usain Bolt or becoming Ben Johnson or running like Marion Yali or a sprinter or even a marathoner. What it is saying in essence is that so that they may seek his pursuit, seek his fulfillment. So you sit down and you envision a future. So let me break it down to the specific. I, as an individual, if I have a vision to build a house, my resources would necessarily be constrained by the vision that I have. And because my vision is constrained by my vision, my resources are constrained by my vision, I would almost likely be focused on bringing my vision about, and I would then ensure that the resources I have are not frittered away or wasted on frivolities, but are instead focused on bringing the vision to reality. So, in recent days, as I have read news reports of how 58 ex-governors, between them, embezzled 2.1 trillion naira, and I look to the Nigerian space, and I know that there are very few, if any, states in Nigeria where you have functional public water works, or where you have functional public school systems, or even healthcare delivery system, or road infrastructure, or even security, which should be the first duty of any state. I then ask myself, is it possible that these 58 governors would have done what they've done if they had visions behind their exertions? When purpose is unknown, abuse becomes inevitable, yes. But how about a situation where resources are entrusted to men who do not have any plan for the people they govern? So it means that stealing the money, whether it is required or not, becomes second nature because they have nothing else to do with the money. They simply have no plan to do anything, so they begin to steal in the place of executing the vision. There is nothing to run with. Nothing. They have nothing to run with. So in the absence of anything to run with, they begin to perverse themselves by stealing. The absence of vision breeds abuse of available resources. It is an inevitable conclusion in the absence of vision. A leader with vision wouldn't have enough resources available for him in the face of the scarcity that we are facing as a people. The little that he has would be properly husbanded and will go towards the provision of critical infrastructure and the vision and making sure that the vision he has for those he governs are brought to fruition. But when there is no vision, there will be no governing priority. It will simply mean that the monies that are available would be stolen. In the absence of visionary purpose, abuse becomes inevitable. Whilst the rulers are lacking in vision, they are not lacking in avarice. So, they build 20 houses. They buy 20 cars. You find a vice presidential lodge becoming a necessity in a country where people cannot even have basic healthcare infrastructure. They steal what they have neither use or need for. What is the point of stealing money that you cannot spend in 100 lifetimes? So it's not like they sat down and consciously decided that we will steal. It is that in the absence of vision, the only thing left to them is the perversion of unbridled stealing. Let's take Yaya Bello, for example. A man pays school fees even for the unborn, and is the governor of a state where salaries are unpaid. Salaries, that would be the most basic of the duties of an employer. I was an employer of labor, and I still do have some employees today. I make bold to say in the public space that I never hold any of my employees. Why must I? Why should anybody hold an employee? But the state, the governor of a state, for 7.5 years, did not pay salaries to those who worked in the state. But he was paying school fees. He paid school fees in advance in dollars. But it is Yaya Bello that we see that we are talking about. What about those that we know nothing about? What about those that we know nothing about? It's happening on a daily basis everywhere you look. Why would the governor of a state believe that it is his due to sit down and be drinking whiskey whose cost runs into millions of naira? It is the absence of vision. Once upon a time in this country, we had a governor like Lateef Jakonde who rode around in a Toyota Crown, lived in his private house at Ilupeju. The one that superintended the affairs of Lagos State from 1999 to 2007 and became the godfather of Lagos. It wasn't enough that he had a place on Bodilon. They had to more or less close off an entire street years later for his own provision. These were state properties. It mattered nothing. The Avarice did not make it even make sense to them that they shouldn't be seen doing this. Lagos State Polytechnic, Ikosi, what became of it? It became this private empire. Etiosa local government on Glover Road. Today there is a skyscraper standing there. The avarice is unbridled. It's almost as if there is a madness governing the thoughts and thinking of these people. They have multiple houses in Dubai, on the Potomac in Washington, everywhere but anywhere. They build houses, they buy houses, they buy cars. Some of them have houses they don't even know anything about. The story was told to me once, and this is a factual one, of one of Nigeria's rich men who was telling his estate agent that he wanted a particular property, he liked it, until the estate agent had to remind him that the house actually belonged to him already. He owns the house, but he didn't know that it was his own house. That is the extent of avarice and how it has maddened them and turned them into insane people, amassing things that are not required or would ever be needed. In the absence of vision, they have become madmen, just acquiring everything. If you've ever seen a madman or walked around the abode of the mad, you'll find that for most of the time, the mad person will acquire everything that he does not need up and down the place. Yorubas will say, the mad gathers everything. And that is the story of the Nigerian ruiners. They gather everything. What they need, what they don't need, they gather it all. If you visit some of their homes, you barely have enough space to walk in because everywhere is chock-a-block with cars that they don't need. They just amass everything. They are hoarders. It is the reign of avarice. It's a form of madness for the Nigerian ruiners. But all these have effects. You find them, they run off to the Barbados to have parties. Their birthdays. So it's not enough to have destination weddings. They are having destination birthday parties now. They go off to ever more exotic islands so that the people they afflict might not even see the crumbs from the table of the parties that they set for themselves. This is the reality of the Nigerian. But these things have effect because it's always about cause and effect. They've divided the country along ethno-religious lines because in the absence of a vision that would have constrained them to unify the people so that they might use the concerted energy of the people to achieve vision, they divide the people. You have white elephant projects littering the entire landscape of the country. There is a Jaukuta there, God knows how many trillions. There is no country that grows without a manufacturing base. How do you have a manufacturing base without a steel industry or aluminium? You have the old thing. We've been at Ajaokuta since Shagari's time. That's like 40 years now we've been on Ajaokuta and we still don't have anything happening there. We still import our steel needs in spite of the abundance of the material in our own country. The latest of their white elephant, 4 billion per kilometer. They are planning to build a coastal road to nowhere. These are the effects of the marriage of Avarice and Myopia. Ever more outrageous projects just because they need to justify the monies they steal blindly. Everywhere you look, you find shortage, acute shortage of public infrastructure simply because it is impossible to build when you are more engaged with stealing. Public debts that are not matched to anything. Look at Lagos State, for instance. Only God knows how much Lagos State is owing for water. There are various World Bank loans meant for the provision of water infrastructure. The entire Lekki Peninsula does not have 1 square inch of pipe water, public means. Everybody sinking boreholes indiscriminately everywhere you turn, simply because the government has failed to provide potable water. When I was growing up in Oyo State, I lived at Inalinde in Ibadan. You could count on the public tap to run. And when it became more and more infrequent, we all lamented and government felt the need to do something about it. There was a sense of shame that attended governance. And even when they wouldn't provide it, they knew that it was their duty to provide it. Now we've normalized the complete and total absence of public water works in Nigeria. Everybody sinking borehole, everybody drinking bottled water or pure water, because the government no longer believes that it has a duty to provide any of these things. Despondency, pessimism has become the order of the day in the absence of any vision behind which the people might queue. Why wouldn't they be running through the Sahara Desert into Libya, across the Mediterranean, into slavery? There is nothing to hope for. That is the despondency born of the marriage of Avarice and Myopia. There is a poverty of private wealth. Yorùbá will say, olówó kan láàrin olòṣì mẹ́fà, olòṣì ní gbogbo wọn. One rich man in the midst of 6 impoverished relatives. They are all poor. Poverty has become endemic. There is a pandemic of poverty in our country, simply because the people have no hope, because there is no vision behind which to queue. The corruption of public morality has become the order of the day, because in the absence of vision, the perversion that has set in has meant that we've elevated the acquisition of wealth over and above every other consideration. So just get rich, however you do it. You have a gambling epidemic in the country because that's about the only way you can offer illusory hope. In the absence of vision, Avarice has overtaken the land. And as avarice has overtaken the land, these are the effects. Today in Nigeria, we're looking and steering we're looking at state collapse. We already have state capture, criminal capture of the state. That is the reality of our lives today. But more importantly, the failure of the state is becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy because of the complete and total absence of any visionary purpose. You have youthful energy that is not channeled to the accomplishment or attainment of any vision. Yorubas will tell you that you cannot be both stingy and avaricious at the same time. But that is the reality of the Nigerian. Those who rule us have assured that in our country today, in the complete and total absence of vision, what we have governing our country is the madness and insanity of crass pursuit of materiality. The governance system itself is powered essentially by greed and avarice. That is the tragedy of our country. I've come by this week purposely to speak to you about the marriage of myopia and avarice in our country. But I have often been accused, unjustly I believe, of merely telling you the problem without ever offering solutions. That is a lie. I've always offered solutions. The only solution to this is that we look at ourselves collectively, look in the mirror, and resolve to do better. If I hold up a mirror for you to behold yourself, if you do not like what you see in the mirror, do not blame me. Adjust yourselves. Don't blame the mirror. Breaking the mirror changes nothing. Cutting my hand changes nothing. Change yourselves. You hear me? Change yourselves. Have you a blessed week ahead. And yes, I'll see you next week. I hope by then I would have become a little better used to the situation where I'm having to speak into a camera without knowing that you are hearing me in the moment. It's not something that I'm particularly happy with, but it is what it is, like I said before. We do the best we can with what we have. Have you a blessed week, and God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your week.